Of course we're not taking her. It's a family vacation. My daughter-in-law, Karen, said it into her phone. She was in the kitchen, thinking I was upstairs napping. But I was just in the laundry room, folding my son's shirts. The dryer was humming, warm and steady. I held a still warm shirt to my face and breathed in the clean cotton smell. Her voice cut through the hum like a sharp little knife. I froze with the shirt in my hands. The fabric was soft, one of the expensive ones I'd bought David for his birthday. My heart did a funny little thump in my chest, a painful thump. It felt like a bird had flown right into a window pane. I didn't come out of the laundry room. I just stood there, listening to the dryer and the muffled sound of Karen's happy chatter. After a minute, I carefully folded the shirt and placed it on top of the pile. My hands were steady. On the outside, I was just a woman doing her chores. On the inside, a little window had cracked. When I finally walked into the kitchen, Karen was gone. A half-empty glass of iced tea sat on the counter, a wet ring spreading on the granite. I picked it up, wiped the counter clean, and put the glass in the dishwasher. I had paid for that granite countertop last year, a little gift to brighten up the place, as I'd told them. The next evening, David came to see me. He never just came to chat. He always had a reason. He sat on the edge of the ottoman in front of my armchair, which made him seem like a little boy again. The evening news was playing softly on the television, casting a blue light across his face. "Mum," he started, rubbing his hands on his knees. "Karen and I were thinking, the kids need a real break before school starts up again." I just nodded, my fingers tracing the pattern on the afghan covering my lap. It was a blanket I'd knitted myself, full of little imperfections only I could see. "We found this amazing deal. A trip. For the whole family," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It would do us all a world of good. Create some memories, you know." "That sounds nice, dear," I said. My voice was even. He finally looked at me. "The thing is, we're a little short. I was hoping you could help us out. A loan. From Dad's insurance money. We'd pay it back, of course." I knew he wouldn't. He never did. I reached for my checkbook on the little table beside my chair. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I wrote out the check for $10,000, the amount he'd whispered. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was the only sound in the room. He took it from my hand, his fingers barely brushing mine. "You're the best, Mom," he said, folding the check and putting it in his pocket. The day they left, the whole house buzzed with their excitement. Suitcases thumped down the stairs. The children, Jessica and Leo, were shouting. I made them all pancakes for breakfast, the way they liked them, with chocolate chips. The smell of melting chocolate and hot syrup filled the air, but I couldn't eat a bite. Karen handed me a list. "The plants need watering every other day, and don't forget to bring in the mail," she said, not as a request, but as an order. She didn't even look at me when she said it. David hugged me at the door. It was a quick, clumsy hug. "Be good, Mom," he said, patting my back. "We'll bring you back a souvenir." I stood at the open door as they loaded their bags into their big SUV. The morning air was cool on my face. I watched them drive away until the red tail lights disappeared around the corner. The silence they left behind was deafening. It pressed in on me. I closed the door, and the click of the lock sounded final. The house felt huge and empty. For the first day, I just drifted. I tidied the kitchen. I watched my game shows. I sat in my armchair, the quiet hum of the air conditioner my only company. It felt wrong. The house wasn't mine anymore. It was just a shell filled with their noise, their clutter, their lives. That evening, I saw the travel brochures on the coffee table, tucked under a stack of magazines. They had been careless. I pulled them out. Pictures of a beach in Hawaii smiled up at me. White sand, blue water, happy families splashing in the waves. On the back page, there was a price list. One of the all-inclusive packages was circled in red ink. The price was $10,000. I put the brochure down on the polished wood. I looked at the sticky ring left by Karen's glass the other day. I looked at the scuff marks on the floor from the kids' shoes. I heard her voice again in my head, as clear as the church bells on Sunday morning. It's a family vacation. And just like that, I understood. Family was a circle they had drawn, and I was on the outside of it. My money was welcome inside, but I was not. The pain I'd felt was gone. It was replaced by something cold and clear and quiet. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was still dark and silent. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sky slowly turn from grey to pink. I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. I picked up the phone. The plastic felt smooth and cool in my hand. My first call was to a locksmith. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "I need to schedule an appointment to have all the locks changed on my house." "Yes, I'm the owner." My second call was to a moving and storage company. I explained what I needed. I wanted every room except my own bedroom, my little sewing room, and the kitchen to be packed up, carefully, and put into a storage unit. "When would you like this done, ma'am?" the polite young man on the phone asked. "Today," I said, "as soon as possible." After I hung up, I found a pad of paper and a pen. I went to the front door and taped a single sheet to the new, shiny lock. In my clearest handwriting, I wrote just 5 words. "Enjoy your permanent vacation." The moving truck arrived an hour later. It was a big white truck that took up the whole driveway. 3 young men in matching blue shirts came to the door. The one in charge, a man with kind eyes and a tired smile, held a clipboard. "Ma'am, you called for a packing service?" he asked. "Yes, I did," I said, holding the door open for them. "I'll show you the rooms." I led them through the house, David and Karen's bedroom, the children's rooms, littered with toys and clothes, the family room in the basement with its giant television and sticky sofa. With every room, I felt a little lighter. The men were quiet and efficient. The only sounds were the rustle of packing paper and the screech of the tape gun. It was a good, clean sound, a sound of things being put in their proper place. One of the movers held up a framed photo from the mantelpiece. It was from last Christmas. All of them smiling, wearing sweaters I had knitted. "Ma'am, you want this packed too?" I looked at their smiling faces. "Yes," I said. "Pack everything." By late afternoon, the house was hollow. The movers had finished. The rooms were empty, clean and quiet. I walked through the bare living room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, making patterns on the floor where the furniture used to be. There were no more video game consoles, no more piles of magazines, no more of Karen's half-finished projects. The locksmith arrived at 4 o'clock sharp. He was an older man, his toolbox worn from years of use. He smelled faintly of metal and oil. "Had some trouble?" he asked, prying the old lock off the front door. The sound of the drill was loud in the empty house. "No trouble," I said, watching his steady hands. "Just time for a fresh start." He nodded, not asking any more questions. He fitted the new lock, a shiny brass one, into the door. When he was done, he handed me a set of 3 new keys. They felt sharp and solid in my palm. They were keys to my house. Only my house now. I paid him in cash, and he gave me a receipt. You have a good evening, ma'am, he said as he left. That night, I made myself a small dinner, a piece of baked salmon and some asparagus. I ate at the little table in my kitchen, the one my husband, Frank, had bought for me years ago. David and Karen had always wanted to get rid of it, said it was old-fashioned. I ate slowly, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, there was no television blaring from the other room, no arguments about homework, no sound of Karen on the phone, her voice always a little too loud. The quiet was like a soft blanket. After dinner, I washed my single plate and fork. I dried them and put them away. I looked around my kitchen. It was clean. It was mine. I thought about Karen's words one more time. It's a family vacation. I suppose it was. And now, my home was just for me, my family of one. It didn't feel sad. It felt peaceful. The next day, my neighbor Carol saw me watering the petunias on my front porch. She came bustling across the street, her little dog yapping at her heels. Carol always knew everything that happened on our block. "Martha, dear, I saw the moving truck yesterday. Don't tell me you're leaving us?" she said, her voice full of concern that wasn't quite real. "Not at all, Carol," I said, smiling at her. I snipped a dead blossom off a plant. "I'm staying right here, just doing a bit of spring cleaning." She peered past me, trying to see into the house through the screen door. "But all the furniture? David and Karen's car is gone. Is everything all right?" "Everything is just fine," I told her. My voice was pleasant and calm. David and his family decided they needed a more permanent vacation. I'm just helping them get started. I gave her a little wave and went back inside, closing the heavy wooden door behind me. I didn't need to explain myself to her, or to anyone. A few days later, a postcard arrived. It was wedged between a Medicare statement and a grocery store flyer. The picture was of a bright orange sunset over a sparkling blue ocean. On the back, in Karen's loopy handwriting, it said, "Having a wonderful time. The kids love the ocean. See you soon." There was no return address. I held the glossy card in my hand. I could almost feel the warm sun and smell the salty air. For a moment, a little pang of something, loneliness maybe, tried to wiggle its way into my heart. I looked at the picture of the perfect sunset, a sunset I had paid for, but wasn't allowed to see. Then I turned the card over and looked at my own name and address written there. This was my address, my house. I walked into the kitchen, opened the trash can, and dropped the postcard inside. It landed on a bed of coffee grounds. I didn't need souvenirs from a trip I wasn't invited on. I had my own home to rediscover. The first week was the quietest. I found myself rediscovering the sounds of the house, the groan of the pipes when the heat came on in the cool mornings, the gentle tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound I hadn't truly heard in years. It had always been drowned out by the noise of their lives. I went into what used to be Jessica's room. The walls were still a bright, loud pink. I ran my hand over the empty wall where her bed used to be. I decided this would be my new sewing room. I spent a whole afternoon moving my old Singer machine and my boxes of fabric and patterns from the damp corner of the basement. The sunlight from the big window was wonderful. It smelled like dust and opportunity. One evening, my phone rang. I saw David's name on the little screen. My heart gave a small flutter, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. I let it ring 3 times, then I answered. "Hi, Mum," he said. His voice was distant, tinny, with the sound of waves in the background. "Just checking in. Everything okay there?" "Everything is fine, David," I said, looking around my peaceful, empty living room. "Good, good. Hey, could you do me a favor? I think I left my good watch on the dresser." Could you put it somewhere safe for me? He didn't wait for an answer. Anyway, the kids say hi. We're having a blast. Talk to you later. The line went dead. He hadn't asked how I was. He hadn't really been talking to me at all. He'd been talking to a caretaker, an answering machine. The next morning, I called Mr. Gable's office. He was my husband, Frank's lawyer, a man as steady and reliable as an old oak tree. His secretary's voice was warm and familiar. "Martha, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm very well, Susan. I'd like to make an appointment to see Mr. Gable. I need to review some documents." "Of course. He has an opening tomorrow at 10. Would that work?" "That would be perfect," I said. After I hung up, I went to the old metal box, where Frank kept our important papers. The key was in its usual spot, in the little china dish on my dresser. I took out the deed to the house and our bank statements. The papers felt thin and important in my hands. They smelled of time and safety. Mr. Gable's office was downtown, in an old brick building. It smelled of floor polish and old paper. He stood up when I walked in, his smile kind. He was a tall man, a little stooped with age, but his eyes were sharp. "Martha, it's good to see you, but I'm sorry it's under these circumstances," he said, gesturing to the comfortable leather chair in front of his big wooden desk. I sat down and explained everything. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told him the facts, simple and plain. I told him about the vacation, the money, the words I overheard. I told him about the locksmith and the moving company. He listened patiently, his hands folded on his desk, his face unreadable. When I was finished, he was silent for a long moment. He looked at the house deed I'd placed on his desk. "Well, Martha," he said finally, his voice gentle. "The house is in your name alone. It has been since Frank passed. You have every legal right to decide who lives there." He paused. "Are you prepared for the fallout? For what David will say?" I looked out the window at the busy street below. I spent 40 years being a wife and a mother. I spent the last 10 being a wallet and a babysitter. I turned back to look him in the eye. I didn't die. I just stopped being convenient. From the lawyer's office, I went to the bank. It was a big, cold building with marble floors that made my shoes click loudly. I didn't feel small, though. I felt purposeful. I sat down with a young woman named Maria, who had kind eyes and a professional smile. I explained that I wanted to protect my savings. I showed her the statements, the frequent withdrawals. I didn't have to explain much. She saw the patterns. "We can open a new account for you, Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice soft. "We can transfer the majority of your funds into it. We can also cancel any supplementary cards on your old account. Would you like to do that?" "Yes," I said. "I would." She typed quickly on her computer. The clicking of the keys was a satisfying sound. It was the sound of a door being locked, a financial door. When I left the bank, my Social Security check and my pension would now go into an account that only I could touch. The weight in my shoulders felt a little lighter. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I went to the fancy butcher shop and bought one perfect thick-cut filet mignon. At the grocery store, I bought a bag of new potatoes, some fresh green beans, and a small bottle of red wine. Not a big box of cheap wine for Karen, but a nice little bottle just for me. The house was quiet as I cooked. The sizzle of the steak in the pan was the only sound. I sat at my little kitchen table and ate my dinner slowly. The steak was perfect. The wine was smooth. Through the window, I watched the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was just as beautiful as the one on Karen's postcard, and it was all mine. My phone rang while I was washing my dish. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Martha. It's Sharon, Karen's friend from book club. Her voice was syrupy sweet. We were just talking about you, wondering how you are. We haven't seen you. I'm very well, Sharon. Thank you for asking, I said, my voice polite but cool. Oh, good. Karen is so lucky to have you. She was just telling us how you're holding down the fort while they're on their lovely family trip. I smiled a little. Yes, I said. I am holding the fort. You have a good night now. I hung up the phone before she could ask another question. I didn't owe her, or anyone, a single explanation. On the 10th day of their vacation, I went to the storage facility. It was a big, clean place with long hallways of bright blue metal doors. The air inside smelled cool and dry, like concrete and cardboard. I found my unit, number 217. The manager had given me a new, heavy-duty padlock. I rolled up the squealing metal door. Inside, their life was stacked in neat brown boxes. A tower of boxes labelled kitchen. Another labelled David office. I saw the kids' bicycles leaning against a wall. A floor lamp, its shade wrapped in plastic, stood in the corner like a sad ghost. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a quiet sense of order. This was where their things belonged. I rolled the door down, the bang echoing in the hallway, and clicked the new lock into place. On my way home, I stopped at the garden centre. I bought 3 rose bushes, a yellow one for friendship, a white one for new beginnings, and a deep red one just because it was beautiful. I spent the afternoon digging in the cool dirt of my front garden bed. The scent of the earth was rich and real. My hands got dirty and my back ached a little, but it was a good ache. An ache from building something, not from waiting for someone. I was washing my hands at the kitchen sink when I heard the car. It was the familiar rumble of David's big SUV. I dried my hands on a dish towel and looked out the window. They were home. The car doors slammed, one after the other. I heard Leo complain about being tired. I saw Karen stretching her back, looking up at the house. I didn't move. I just stood by the window, my heart beating a calm, steady rhythm. I watched David walk up the porch steps, fumbling for his keys. He put the key in the new lock. It didn't go in. He jiggled it. He frowned. He tried again. Karen walked up behind him, her arms crossed. What's wrong? I could hear her voice faintly through the glass. He stepped back, confused, and that's when he saw the note I had taped to the door. He pulled it off. I saw him read it, his face going blank with disbelief. He handed it to Karen. I watched her read it, her mouth falling open. Then her head snapped up, and she stared at the front door as if it had personally insulted her. The knocking started a second later. It was loud and angry. My phone rang. The screen glowed with David's name. I let it ring twice, took a breath, and answered. I sat down in my armchair, the one with the Afghan I'd knitted. Mum, what in the world is going on? He demanded. There was no greeting. His voice was tight with anger. In the background, I could hear Karen yelling. I changed the locks, David, I said. My voice was even. You changed the locks. Why? We can't get in the house. The kids are out here on the lawn. This is my house, David, I said simply. Karen's voice screeched in the background. Ask her where our stuff is. Ask her what she did with our things. Mom, where is our stuff? He asked, his voice cracking a little. This isn't funny. It's not meant to be funny, I told him. All of your belongings are safe. They are in a storage unit. I paid for the first month. The unit is in your name. I will text you the address and the code for the key. I paused. After that, it is your responsibility. The banging on the door started again, much harder this time. It sounded like a fist. Karen was screaming my name. Martha, you let us in right now. This is our home. You can't do this. I got up and walked to the living room window. I pulled back the lace curtain just a little. They were all on the porch, looking furious and lost. The children looked confused and scared. A little part of my heart ached for them, but I knew this wasn't my fault. David saw my face in the window. He ran to it. Mum, please, just open the door. We can talk about this. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, David, I said, my voice muffled by the glass. You have your family. You wanted a family vacation. I let the curtain fall back into place. I saw my neighbour Carol's blinds twitch across the street. Let her look. This was my business, my house. They yelled for another 10 minutes. I heard Karen on her phone, talking loudly to someone, probably her mother. Finally, I heard the car doors slam again. The engine started with an angry roar, and they drove away. The silence that fell over the house was heavy. My hands were shaking, just a little. I went into the kitchen and put the kettle on for tea. The whistle, when it came, seemed shrill in the quiet. I poured the hot water over a tea bag in my favourite mug, the one with the little blue flowers that Frank had given me. I sat at my kitchen table, cradling the warm mug. I looked at my new rose bushes through the window. Their leaves were dark green in the evening light. I had done it. I had actually done it. There was no going back. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. I took a sip of my tea. It was hot and sweet. The next morning, the police came. I saw the patrol car pull up through my kitchen window. 2 officers, a man and a woman, walked up my front path. They looked very young. I opened the door before they had a chance to knock. The air was cool and smelled of damp grass. Ma'am, my name is Officer Daniels, the young man said. He was polite, but his eyes were wary. We received a call about a dispute. A Mr. David Miller said you've locked him out of his home. This is my home, officer, I said calmly. My name is Martha Miller. David is my son. I held out the folder I had prepared. This is the deed to the house. It's in my name. And this, I added, handing him a separate paper, is a copy of the restraining order I had my lawyer file yesterday, just as a precaution. The officer took the papers. He read them carefully, his partner looking over his shoulder. He looked from the deed to me, then back at the deed. His whole posture changed. He became less tense, more respectful. I see, he said, handing the papers back. Well, ma'am, it seems everything is in order. This is a civil matter, not a police matter. They can't force you to let them in. Thank you, officer, I said. I appreciate you coming by. They nodded and walked back to their car. I watched them go, then closed my door. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was a deeply satisfying sound. Later that day, Karen's mother called. Her name was Beatrice. We had never been friends, just 2 women connected by our children's marriage. Her voice was like ice cubes rattling in a glass. Martha, I have never in my life heard of such a cruel, vindictive thing to do, she began, without even a hello. I took the cordless phone into my new sewing room and sat down by the sunny window. Hello, Beatrice, I said, my voice pleasant. You threw your own son and your grandchildren out on the street. What kind of monster are you? I didn't throw anyone out on the street, I corrected her gently. I gave them a $10,000 vacation, and I secured all their belongings in a climate-controlled storage unit. They are far from homeless. They are staying with you, I presume. There was a sputtering sound on the other end of the line. Well, yes, but that's not the point. The point is, you have a duty to your family. My duty, I said, looking at the bright pink walls I was planning to paint, is to myself now. I've fulfilled my other duties. It's time for David and Karen to fulfill theirs. I hung up the phone. I didn't need to hear the rest. I spent the rest of the week painting. I bought gallons of paint in a colour called sea salt. It was a soft, pale greenish blue, the colour of a calm ocean morning. I painted over Jessica's bright pink room. I painted over the scuff marks and crayon drawings in Leo's old room. I painted the living room, covering the beige that Karen had insisted on. The work was hard. My muscles ached at the end of each day. But as I rolled the cool, clean colour over the old walls, I felt like I was washing the house clean. The smell of fresh paint filled every room. It was the smell of a blank page, a new start. My neighbour Carol stopped by again. She brought a plate of brownies, which was her way of asking for information. "Martha, dear, the whole street is talking," she said, her eyes wide as she looked at my empty living room. "The police were here. Is there anything I can do?" "You can have a brownie with me," I said, taking the plate. "I'm just redecorating, Carol. You know how it is. Sometimes you just need to clear everything out to get a fresh perspective." I smiled at her, a nice, friendly, uninformative smile. She ate her brownie and left, knowing no more than when she'd arrived. On Friday, a letter came in the mail. It was from a lawyer, David and Karen's lawyer. It was full of big, angry words like unlawful eviction and emotional distress. It demanded that I immediately give them back access to the house. I read it twice, sitting at my kitchen table. The legal threats didn't scare me. Mr. Gable had prepared me for this. He had told me they would try to bully me. He had told me to stay calm. I took the letter and put it in the folder with the deed and my other important papers. Then I went to the phone and made a call. "Hello, St. Jude's?" "Yes, I was wondering if you need any volunteers for the Saturday soup kitchen." There was a pause. "Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I can be there at 9. My name is Martha Miller. I'll see you then." I hung up the phone. I had better things to do than worry about angry letters. The next day, for the first time in over 10 years, I woke up with a purpose that had nothing to do with my son's family. I put on a comfortable pair of shoes and my plainest apron. At the soup kitchen, the air was warm and smelled of coffee and baking bread. It was noisy and chaotic, but it was a good kind of chaos. I was put on the serving line next to a woman named Eleanor. She was a few years older than me, with a quick laugh and hands that were never still. "First time here?" she asked as we ladled stew into bowls. "Yes, it is," I said. "I found I had some extra time on my hands." "Well, we're glad to have you," she said with a genuine smile. "The world has enough people with extra time. It's the ones who decide to use it that make a difference." I looked at the line of people, at their tired and grateful faces. I filled another bowl with hot stew. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly useful. Not just convenient, useful. I started volunteering at the soup kitchen every Saturday. I liked the work. It was simple and honest. I met people whose troubles made my own seem small. Eleanor and I became friends. We'd have a cup of coffee together after our shift, sitting at one of the long, empty tables. The big hall would be quiet then, smelling of bleach and leftover coffee. "My son is still sending me angry messages," I told her one Saturday, stirring sugar into my cup. The spoon made a little clinking sound against the thick ceramic mug. "Of course he is," Eleanor said, not looking up from buttering a piece of toast. "You took away his cook, his cleaner, his banker, and his babysitter all in one go. You didn't just lock him out of a house, Martha. You locked him out of his comfort zone." Her words were plain and true. I had been more than a mother. I had been a convenience. And people get very upset when their conveniences are taken away. A week later, I received another letter from David's lawyer. This one was different. It was an invitation, a request for a meeting. All of us, me, David, Karen, and both our lawyers, they wanted to mediate. I knew what that meant. It meant they were going to try to gang up on me in a stuffy office. I called Mr. Gable. "They want a meeting," I said. "I expected as much," he said, his voice calm and dry. "Their threats didn't work, so now they'll try to appeal to your sense of guilt." "Should I go?" I asked, looking at my freshly painted walls. The sea salt color was so peaceful. "Yes," he said. "We'll go together. It's time to make things very clear for them. Let them see you are not the same woman they left behind when they went on vacation." The meeting was in a conference room with a long, polished table that reflected the fluorescent lights from the ceiling. The air conditioning hummed loudly. David and Karen sat on one side with their lawyer, a young man with a slick haircut who looked annoyed to be there. I sat on the other side with Mr. Gable. Karen looked thin and angry. David just looked tired. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Their lawyer started. He talked about family, about obligation, about the emotional trauma to the children. He made it sound like I had committed a terrible crime. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly on the table. When he was done, Mr. Gable cleared his throat. "My client, Mrs. Miller, is the sole owner of the property at 124 Oak Street. She has been more than generous to her son and his family for many years. That generosity has come to an end." "This is ridiculous," Karen burst out, her voice sharp. "That's our home, our children's home." "Was it your home when you decided to take a vacation without me, using my money?" I asked. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension in the room. Karen's mouth snapped shut. Mr. Gable slid a folder across the table. "This is a summary of the financial support Mrs. Miller has provided over the last 5 years, including down payments for cars, private school tuition, and numerous personal loans that were never repaid. It totals just over $150,000. David finally looked up. His face was pale. He had never seen the numbers all added up like that. "And this," Mr. Gable continued, placing another document on the table, "is a copy of Mrs. Miller's new will." Karen leaned forward, her eyes greedy. "The will?" "In the new will," Mr. Gable said, his voice steady and clear, "the house and the remainder of Mrs. Miller's estate are to be left to a selection of charities: St. Jude's Children's Hospital, the local animal shelter, and the St. James Church soup kitchen." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Karen stared at the paper as if it were a snake. David's face crumpled. He looked like a lost little boy. You can't do that," David whispered. It was a plea, not a demand. "I can," I said, looking directly at him for the first time. "It's my money. It's my house. It's my life. I'm taking it back." Karen stood up so fast, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is because of me, isn't it? You've always hated me." "No, Karen," I said, my voice still quiet. "This isn't about hate. This is about respect. Something you never showed me. You just saw a checkbook and a babysitter. You even said it yourself. It was a family vacation. I guess I just wasn't part of the family you were talking about." I stood up. Mr. Gable stood up with me. The meeting was over. We walked out of the silent room, leaving them staring at the papers on the polished table. As the heavy door closed behind us, I felt a click, just like my new deadbolt at home. Another lock sliding firmly into place. Life settled into a new rhythm after that meeting. A quiet, steady rhythm, like the ticking of my grandfather clock. The angry phone calls stopped. The letters from their lawyer stopped. It seemed they had finally understood. The bank was closed. I started filling the empty rooms, not with clutter, but with purpose. The room that used to be David and Karen's became a guest room. I bought a simple wooden bed frame and a new mattress. I found a lovely old quilt at a second-hand store, full of soft blues and greens. It smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Leo's old room, the one next to my new sewing room, I turned into a library. I went to a local furniture maker, a nice young man who worked out of his garage, and had him build bookshelves along one wall. It was the first time I'd ever commissioned a piece of furniture just for me. The smell of the freshly cut pine was wonderful. I filled the shelves with all the books I had always meant to read. One afternoon, Eleanor from the soup kitchen came over for tea. It was the first time I'd had a guest in my house since the change. I made a lemon pound cake from scratch. The sweet, citrusy smell filled the kitchen. "My goodness, Martha," she said, looking around my clean, bright living room. "You've made this place into a sanctuary." "I just made it into a home," I said, pouring her a cup of tea. "My home." We sat and talked for hours, not about my son or her daughter who lived far away. We talked about books and gardening and the best way to get a stain out of an apron. It was easy. It was normal. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for a very long time. "You know," she said as she was leaving, "the senior centre is starting a watercolour class. I was thinking of signing up. You should come with me." "I can't even draw a straight line," I laughed. "Neither can I," she said, her eyes twinkling. "That's why it will be fun." A few weeks later, I was in my front yard, weeding the rose bushes, when a car slowed down and pulled over to the curb. It was David. He was alone. He got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, looking uncertain. He had lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't come up the walkway. He just stood there. "Mum?" he called out. His voice was quiet. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands onto my gardening apron. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I just wanted to see if you were okay," he said. It sounded rehearsed. "I'm fine, David," I said. It was the truth. He shuffled his feet on the pavement. "Look, Mum, I know I messed up. I'm sorry." The apology sounded thin, like a worn-out blanket. I wondered who had told him to say it. His lawyer? His mother-in-law? "I'm sorry too," I said. And I was. I was sorry he had become a man who could treat his own mother that way. I was sorry for the little boy he used to be. He seemed to be waiting for me to say more, to invite him in, to tell him it was all a misunderstanding. But I had nothing more to say. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the chirping of a sparrow in the oak tree. "Karen?" "She found a job," he said finally, as if that would fix everything. "And we're looking for an apartment. It's hard. The deposits are so much money." There it was, the real reason for his visit. The apology was just the key he thought would unlock the bank. I looked at him, my son, standing there on the sidewalk of the home he grew up in, a stranger asking for a handout. "Yes," I said, turning back to my roses. "I imagine it is hard." He stood there for another minute. I could feel his eyes on my back. I didn't turn around. I found a stubborn little weed at the base of the white rose bush and pulled it out, roots and all. I heard his car door open and close. I heard the engine start. I heard him drive away. That night, I sat in my quiet living room, reading a book from my new library. The house was peaceful. The only light was the soft glow of my reading lamp. I thought about David. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a distant sadness. I had raised him. I had loved him. But somewhere along the way, he had lost his path. And I had finally realized that it wasn't my job to find it for him. My job now was to tend my own garden, to pull the weeds and nurture the things that brought me joy. I heard the grandfather clock in the hall begin to chime, 10 o'clock. It was a deep, reassuring sound. I closed my book, turned off the lamp, and went to bed. I fell asleep almost immediately in the quiet, peaceful sanctuary of my own home. I signed up for the watercolor class with Eleanor. The classroom was in the basement of the community centre, but it was bright and clean. It smelled of wet paper, chalk dust, and something sweet, like cinnamon from the bake sale upstairs. Our teacher was a man named George Henderson. He was a retired high school art teacher with kind, crinkly eyes and paint stains on his shirt cuffs. "There are no mistakes in here," he told us on the first day, "only happy accidents." I wasn't very good. My flowers looked like colourful blobs. My trees looked like green clouds. But I loved the feeling of the wet brush on the thick paper. I loved mixing the colours, watching a dab of blue and a touch of yellow swirl together to make a perfect green. Eleanor was even worse than I was. Her paintings were a cheerful mess, and we would laugh until our sides hurt. It was the best kind of fun, the kind where you don't have to be good at something to enjoy it. A new family moved into the little house on the other side of me, a young couple with a new baby. I saw the mother, a girl who couldn't have been more than 25, trying to carry groceries and a crying baby from her car one afternoon. She looked exhausted. I remembered that feeling, that bone-deep tiredness. I went into my kitchen and took out the chicken casserole I had planned for my own dinner. I put it in a basket with a loaf of fresh bread and walked over. "Hi," I said gently. "I'm Martha from next door. I thought you might be able to use this." The young woman, whose name was Sarah, looked at the casserole as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh," she whispered. "Thank you. I haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days." "I know the feeling," I said. "Go on and eat. I can hold the little one for you while you do." She handed me the warm, fussing bundle. I rocked the baby on my shoulder, humming an old lullaby. The baby quieted down, his little head tucked under my chin. Sarah ate her dinner standing up in her kitchen, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the pure, simple joy of being needed in the right way. George, our art teacher, started staying a few minutes after class to look at my paintings. He always found something kind to say. "You have a good sense of colour, Martha," he said one afternoon, tilting his head to look at my lopsided painting of a sunset. "I have a good sense of making a mess, George," I replied, wiping blue paint off my thumb. He chuckled. "That too. Say, there's a little coffee shop down the street. They make a decent cappuccino. Would you let me buy you one?" I was surprised. It had been years since a man had asked me for coffee. For a moment, I felt a flutter of the girl I used to be. "I'd like that very much," I said. We sat by the window in the warm, noisy cafe. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and sugar. We talked about our lives, our late spouses, our children. It was easy and comfortable. He didn't want anything from me. He was just a nice man enjoying a cup of coffee with a nice woman. When he walked me to my car, he just smiled. "See you next Tuesday, Martha." And I knew I would. One morning my phone rang. It was my granddaughter, Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since before the vacation. My heart did a little flip. "Grandma?" Her voice was small, hesitant. Hello, Jessica, I said, keeping my voice soft. I I got the lead in the school play. It's The Secret Garden. Oh, sweetie, that's wonderful. Your grandfather loved that story. I could picture her on the stage, her face bright under the lights. I know, she said quietly. Mom said I shouldn't call you. She's still mad, but I wanted to tell you. There was a pause. I miss your pancakes, Grandma. The words were a little arrow, straight to my heart. I miss you too, darling, I said. You break a leg in that play. I'm very proud of you. We said goodbye, and I hung up. I knew it wasn't a solution. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was a little thread, a connection that hadn't been completely broken. And for now, that was enough. This morning, I woke up early, before the sun. The house was quiet. I made myself a cup of coffee and took it out to the front porch. The air was cool and smelled of dew and the sweet scent of my red roses. I sat in the old wooden rocking chair Frank and I used to sit in, its gentle creak a familiar comfort. I watched the sky turn from dark grey to a soft, hopeful pink. The street was still. The world was mine. I thought about the woman I was a few months ago, standing in a laundry room, heartbroken by a cruel sentence. I thought about the quiet rage that had followed. And then I thought about now. My life wasn't loud or exciting, but it was mine. It was full of watercolour messes, the smell of fresh paint, the taste of coffee with a new friend, and the warmth of a neighbour's gratitude. The sun finally broke over the horizon, spilling golden light onto my garden. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot and good, and I was free.